Hey friends, welcome to episode 483 of the My 123 Cents podcast. If you are watching on YouTube this week, thank you, first of all. And secondly, I apologize for the different look and perhaps even the different sound. My usual recording area is under construction at the moment. We're putting in a new wood floor and hopefully be able to get in there and have more of a studio-like feel to it eventually, sooner rather than later. But right now I'm in the spare bedroom closet recording. Chad Smart is here, of course, and so he's not the only turkey here today. I did bring Gobbledygooker out of the other room to join us for this week's episode. Chad, what's going on?
Not much. I'm just noticing that if I turn this way, if you're watching the video, it looks like I'm about to be eaten by Mondo.
Yes,
So,
that is true. Mondo, the My
mm,
123 Cents mascot, the monkey, part of the Jittery Monkey Podcasting Network, and it is President's Day. And we wish you well if you have the day off, fortunate enough to have a job that gives you President's Day off, which I actually am in that situation right now. So I'm excited about that. But we're recording on Sunday afternoon, or I guess late morning on Sunday. I am wearing my Gorilla Monsoon t shirt. He was a former WWF president. I figured the other authority figure t-shirt that I have right now probably wouldn't be appropriate to wear. I might get canceled if I do, so you can figure out who that is by process of elimination, I'm sure. But Chad, authority figures in pro wrestling is the topic today. We're not going to go through and name our favorites, although I certainly would, like to hear some of your thoughts on the past because really, authority figures have been around since you and I, have been wrestling fans. It was a lesser presence back in the day with Jack
mm.
Tunney, with Jim Crockett on Jim Crockett Promotions. Bob Geigel would weigh in every once in a while on JCP as well. What are your thoughts on those early days of the quote unquote authority figure? Because Vince McMahon was really the man behind everything, but back then he was just a commentator.
Yeah. Well, first I was going to jump back because you were talking about the Jittery Monkey Podcasting Network and President's Day, and I thought you were going to give a shout out to El Presidente de Monkey, Greg Mahachko. So you got to name drop him to keep him,
I don't think
keep
those are words, but okay.
El Presidente.
A monkey.
Well, hey, my Spanish is a little broken. Okay.
Pobre. That's pobre.
Sure. Uh,
That means it's poor.
oh, yeah. Like I said, if you followed my Instagram story from last week, I hashtagged a series of photos with need to learn Spanish. So let's just leave it at that. Yes. Going back to your question, I, you know, I had you not mentioned them, I wouldn't even have thought of Jim Crockett or Bob Geigel. Like the only authority figure I recall from that I would classify as an authority figure was Jack Tunney, who I believe we've come to find out wasn't even employed by WWF during that time. He was just a guy that was walking by on the street, and they needed someone to shoot a little video saying pretending to be president or in charge, and they just pulled a guy that was walking by. It's true. I read it on the internet.
Now, he was a promoter in Canada. He wasn't just a
Oh,
guy.
and that sounds more legitimate than what I just said. Canada's not even a real place.
Oh, here we go.
Hey, you're wearing the shirt, so I gotta.
Smart on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, for years, probably close to a decade, I didn't pull it up to double check it, but from when I started watching wrestling until the mid '90s when Gorilla Monsoon eventually became president, and then Roddy Piper, but there's always been kind of that authority figure in that role, and I think really when we got into the Attitude Era, that role became more of the heel authority figure, and I say the Attitude Era, but really Eric Bischoff, I think, deserves the credit for being the first true heel authority figure with the NWO storyline back in late '96. So, um, 25 plus years later, we're still using the authority figure as a regular, they're regular members of the show, basically. And I know we've talked about excuse me, about that before, and it's kind of a I think you probably more so than I think it's a bit overplayed and overdone. Or am I putting words in your
Mm, slightly, but I agree with you. Yes, it is overdone, and the heel authority figure is way overplayed and it's way done. And that's, one of my, I guess, criticisms with modern wrestling is that we're still going by things that have been around for over 20 years, 25, like you said, without with very little evolution. Although, with that point said, I would say that we are probably in the best phase of the authority figures
mind?
since the days of Jack Tunney and Gorilla Monsoon, because even though WWE has Adam Pearce and Nick Aldis, and you see them pretty much on a weekly basis, they're not the, the, I guess, the heel figure trying to screw over the babyface or trying to stack the odds against someone. It's more of a legitimate, okay, I'm running the show. Here's what's going on. Okay, if you're going to test me, I'll listen to what you have to say, but I'm not necessarily going to give you what you want phase.
Yeah, and that's we'll start, I guess, with WWE since you brought up Nick Aldis and Adam Pearce. Adam Pearce was kind of doing it all by himself for a while there.
Mm.
I feel like a lot of times the authority figure role, uh, the whole point of it was when someone couldn't wrestle anymore. We saw it with Mick Foley, we saw it with William Regal when he was injured, Kurt Angle for a while. So is it just giving these superstars who would probably still draw some attention and draw some fans and viewers, giving them an on-camera role where they're not getting physical?
Mhm.
Back in the 80s, those roles were filled by managers. Bobby Heenan, Mr. Fuji,
Mm.
Classy Freddie Blassie. They couldn't wrestle anymore, so they became managers. But now it's more of this kind of mouthpiece figurehead of the company, an extension. And I think when we knew that Vince McMahon was really the mastermind behind everything, did the authority figure even need to be a thing? Because
Mhm.
Vince could come out, and I think sometimes did come out and kind of overrule or trump whatever the authority figure was stipulating on a show. But then I know they would throw in. And sometimes it got too convoluted with we're bringing up the board of directors and we're bringing up the CEO and the CFO and all these other people. Do fans really follow all of that logic or supposed alleged logic?
I doubt it. I think the main thing is the storytelling and whatever the result would be. Who, doesn't matter who made the match, if as long as the match is happening, or if someone is being suspended indefinitely, or yes, I believe that's how Gorilla Monsoon described when Vader got suspended. He was suspended indefinitely, and they didn't know how long he was going to stay in the air.
Oh Lord. Okay. So do you think with The Rock returning, he is um, on the board of TKO? I don't
Mhm.
know how much they've broadcast that on uh, programming, but obviously the internet is abuzz with it, and we
Mhm.
know that it is a thing. Will they use that in any of the storytelling? Do you think? I know that on SmackDown Friday night, as we're recording this before Raw, uh, Rock said he was going to do everything in his power to uh, make sure. And again, here come the wrestling conspiracy theorists. I want to get your take on this too. When he said, "I'm going to do everything in my authority or in my power to make sure that you lose at WrestleMania," he never said a name, and his body position changed, and he was pointing at Roman Reigns. And I don't know if
Mhm.
you've seen this conspiracy theory, and I don't even know if it's a conspiracy theory, but now, there's talk, at least among some, that Rock is going to screw over Roman. I'm leaning towards right now Seth Rollins screwing over Cody, but I could be wrong. What say you?
I had not seen that. I'd only seen the conspiracy of, and granted, it was a photo, so who knows how long this actually was done. If it was part of another full-on movement. But when The Rock went to acknowledge the bloodline, instead of holding up the one finger, he held up the gun salute. So, as I texted you, he was obviously throwing more acknowledgement to the Bang Bang Gang over in AEW, Blood Club Gold. And so I expect him to be all elite by June. But two points here to take. So let me take this first. First, the conspiracy theory. I think at this point, with how long Roman Reigns' reign has gone on, screwing him out of the title would be the worst way to get the title off of him. I think it would cheapen whoever beats him, be it Cody, be it R-Truth, which is who should do it, or you know, whoever. But I think having The Rock come back and turn would not, I can see the justification, like, oh, well, that will then set up the Roman Rock
Yeah,
match, if
yeah.
it ever happens. But I think it would cheapen the victory. So, um, although if you buy into the conspiracy theories, The Rock really doesn't care about anybody but The Rock. So as long as he looks good, then that's fine. Um, the other point is, is Rock going to use his power as a TKO board? They did mention it on the press conference that he was, part of the board, and um, I can see them blurring the lines, especially if Triple H gets more involved.
Yeah,
And but then it becomes a power struggle between The Rock and Triple H obviously can't
yeah.
wrestle anymore. So then what's the payoff there? It's kind of like when Stephanie would be in charge, and she was terrible to people and they could never get their heat back. Um,
I
so
want that with Triple H, because I think they have acknowledged that he is head of creative or whatever. But when it comes to that character on TV, and I know he's come out and just kind of addressed the crowds, and I want to get to we'll transition here in a minute, but I want to also kind of talk about Triple H's role right now, where it's not necessarily an authority figure per se, but it is kind of a figurehead within the company. Is that because again, I don't watch Raw every week, so I just kind of see the clips online, and he's running the press conferences. It's very parallel to AEW Tony Khan, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But where do you see Triple H's role right now? Does he trump whatever Aldis and Pierce say and do? That's kind of my view. Is he's kind of that Vince McMahon when he had Mick Foley or Kurt Angle or
mhm.
Steven Regal or William Regal running the show.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I think in the hierarchy of the company, it would make
Mm-hmm.
sense for Triple H to have that. And the fact that they now refer to him as Paul Triple H Levesque, like
Yeah,
they've, taken the character aspect and minimized that in favor of the real person.
mm-hmm.
But I think, like you said, he is there not necessarily as an authority figure. When he shows up, he's more of a company man, promoting the company line or promoting whatever's coming up and kind of lead. To my knowledge, and as far as I can recall, I don't recall him having many interactions with Pierce or Aldis. I think he introduced Nick Aldis when he first showed up,
Yeah,
if I remember correctly. But you never see them like talking and being like, oh, well, you should do this, or why did you do that? It's so I think in terms of story, they try to give Aldis and Pierce they're the buck stops with them aspect, and then Triple H just comes in, you know, when a major announcement that has nothing to do actually with the matches takes
yeah.
place.
So let's talk about AEW because like we said, 20 plus years, really for us, 40 years with Jack Tunney back in the day, but there's always been that authority figure. And AEW, to my knowledge, has never really had a general manager or a commissioner or a president or anybody like that.
Mm-hmm.
We do get announcements frequently from Tony Khan.
Oh wait, just a second. Oh, sorry, he was just making a new announcement.
Which, yeah, to the point where it's almost become a parody, kind of Dixie Carter like.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about TNA in a little bit as well. But I want to talk to you about AEW. I guess that's one of the things that has differentiated the company from WWE. Should Tony Khan? I think I know your answer on that should, but would he need to be a part of? I almost feel like with the online community being kind of split on him,
Mhm.
I almost, and I'm going to probably regret saying this, but what would be the risk or the danger in putting him on TV? I know there's been a lot of criticism from some of the podcasts that I listen to that he really needs to find someone that is a better spoken person out there. But to be fair, before Stephanie McMahon found her groove, she was like nails on a chalkboard watching as well. So, you know, does AEW need that authority figure? And should Tony Khan stop doing the announcements as owner of AEW, Tony Khan? How do you play into all of this as AEW, or do we just kind of stay the course and not have an authority figure there?
Mhm. Yeah, well, I mean, right now, Tony Khan, it's hard for him to appear human when he's in front of the camera.
Mhm.
So definitely, I don't think he should be an authority, on-screen presence more than he already is.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, for me, that's one of the things I like about AEW is that they don't have that authority figure that shows up. And even though I guess Tony and everybody knows that Tony owns it, they mention it frequently. They know that he's the one making decisions, but I guess he comes off more of just the booker than the necessarily the authority figure.
Mhm.
And I like the fact that if something happens, you don't go we don't cut back to Tony Khan being like, okay, this is what's going to happen. He relays it through Tony Schiavone or Excalibur. I'm like, oh well, Tony Khan just told me in the headset this is this match is beneficial or this is going to happen. And I think that is a good way to go. One, because like you said, it differentiates you from what WWE is doing. And I think that's one of the biggest complaints with TNA when they were first coming up is that they tried to be WWE and they weren't fans that wanted something different weren't getting it. And I think now if you're if you want something different than WWE, AEW does provide that, better or worse, and we've talked before about there are
Mhm.
pros and cons to that
Sure.
strategy. But yes, sticking with topic, I don't think they need an authority figure. I think Tony Khan is fine, and Tony Khan reminds me more of the Jack Tunney situation where you only saw him when if he's making a not necessarily he makes the announcements as I think owner and being like, hey, look, this is what we're doing. We're debuting here, or we've got this show coming up, or and those are the big announcements. But anything that actually happens within the confines of the ring, you don't need like I said earlier, just have him have the announcers bring it up, have a graphic. It gets the same message across in less time. So I think they should stay course on that.
Another kind of real life situation authority figure role recently came down with Scott Demore being released
Mhm.
from TNA. And I didn't realize how long he had kind of been running things for several years now.
Mhm.
And I think was part of the whole rebrand of going from Impact Wrestling back to TNA. Apparently, Anthem has let him go and replaced him with someone who I don't think has a whole lot of wrestling
Mhm.
experience and or knowledge. I think a lot of people have viewed this, at least on the online reports that I've read and some of the podcasts that I've listened to, viewed this as a step back. Obviously, Scott Demore was beloved. And I don't know I don't know how much TNA you were watching before this happened. I don't know what kind of role he had on camera. Was he an on camera authority figure as well? Because if I remember correctly, and he was around in those early days when we would watch the pay per views at your
Mhm.
place 20 years ago. Uh, if I remember correctly, though, he was just kind of the manager or the mouthpiece of Team Canada, and he was not in any other kind of uh,
Yeah,
booking.
as far as I know, I don't know if he had much stroke backstage. And I
Uh,
think, in the last, I don't know, 5, 10 years, however long it's been that he's been there, he has been, from my understanding, the driving force of trying to make Impact or TNA uh, reach the levels that it should have achieved, 10, 15 years ago when
yeah,
if they hadn't tried to be WWE. Um, and I don't watch TNA weekly. I think part of the reason is because it's a taped show. It just something about the energy doesn't translate well, and so I just and not a knock against TNA because what I have seen has been really good in the last year or two. But the last time I did watch, they had Santino Marella as their on-air authority figure,
Okay.
and I think D'Amore would show up occasionally, but he was kind of more like the Tony Khan situation where he's running things he's making sure that the company is running smoothly and then having Santino as the guy dealing with the wrestlers on camera. um, and I've read the reports that you've probably seen as well, and everything going on. I do think I don't fully understand Anthem's decision to remove him. Something about they're reorganizing and wanting to bring TNA more in line with Anthem's company as a whole and all their other projects. But from what I've read and seen, I think the way that it was handled was done poorly. And as someone who, in the last 2-3 years has undergone corporate changes myself and how those were done, I see a lot of similarities here. And I don't think it's necessarily going to be a bad thing, but when you start off basically telling your employees that they should be leery of you and you're not entirely trustworthy and to be upfront about something, it could cause resentment down the line. And we'll come back in a year and see how TNA is doing and see, if anybody has left or if anybody new has come in based on, the new structure of what they're doing. And again, I think TNA is unfortunately in that position because they're not a live show, because they're on a station that few people probably know exists. How, there are rumors, they were trying to bring in Braun Strowman. They made an offer for CM Punk. Are they going to be able to get top tier talent? I mean, I guess they did just get Nick Nemeth, but your mileage may vary on that one.
Yeah, and I also had wondered kind of if the agreement with having Jordan Grace at the Royal Rumble, there had been some speculation that Anthem may be selling, and WWE could be a part of that and turning it into another OVW like developmental territory. These are all things that you hear and see online and rumors. So who knows what is real and what isn't. Uh, I hope that Scott D'Amore lands on his feet, though, because everything I've heard, he's very passionate about the business and has, a knack, I guess, for it. And like you said, TNA had kind of turned things around over the past few years and was getting better with the storytelling and whatnot, the rebranding and where they go from here. When you kind of start to get that momentum and then you pull one of the motivating factors out from that push, it'll be interesting to see in the next 6 months, 12 months where they end up and how things end up going for them as a company. But I definitely think there's room out there for a company like TNA to be a part of the landscape of professional wrestling. Back to kind of more of the authority figure talk and conversations. We've hit WWE. We talked about what was going on or what goes on in AEW, maybe not necessarily needing that authority figure role. I can remember back in my days with Stride, when Stride Pro Wrestling, an independent organization here in Southern Illinois, for those who aren't familiar, company kind of got underway and started back in March of 2016 with the shows. They were doing some of the training prior to that to get people ready for these events. But, Tyler Heath Hatton, who owns Stride or owned Stride, brought in Sam Hamblin, who was a friend of his from high school back in the day. You can check out the podcast between those two, the Chatting with Hatton podcast. But, Sam was a fan, but was never a worker or trained or anything like that. And I think in order to have somebody a part of the show and kind of keep things running and flowing, he was named the general manager, and he was a baby face for most of that run. And then when Sam left for some other reasons, I became the GM, the interim GM, and then eventually the GM, along with being ring announcer and along with doing commentary. And I had kind of talked to Tyler about this a little bit, but to me it was always awkward being the GM because I'm also doing commentary and I'm also supposed to be, if I see somebody cheating or doing something wrong, and there are storyline circumstances where the heel has to get the advantage for a bit, so it's like, where do I draw that line of injecting myself and doing something that was quote unquote logical? I'm standing here watching somebody get assaulted with a chair and not doing anything about it versus then the next match I'm coming in there and I'm laying down the law, so to speak. So that was always kind of difficult in that authority figure role, where I think in wrestling, in all of wrestling, sometimes that authority figure role becomes an illogical part of the equation, and wrestling in general. And I think we've talked about trying to apply logic to an illogical situation in wrestling, because you have a guy getting attacked in one match and six referees and the baby faces come out, and then later in the show or the next week someone gets attacked and it's a 5-minute mugging basically happening in the ring. So that's kind of just a quick little not rant, but a quick little synopsis of my experiences in that role of being GM, because it does become a situation where sometimes you paint yourself into a corner.
Yeah, I was just thinking while you were saying that, the future episodes, maybe we can talk about, does wrestling need instant replay? And it doesn't, right now it doesn't have it, but if, let's say, sticking with authority figures, William Regal, when he was wrestling, would often use the brass knucks, and you would clearly see it on camera, but no action was ever taken by the authority figure, by anybody to say like, okay, no, you're not going to do this. And, we're going to have either another referee out here to watch your matches, or because it's on tape, on camera, when we see it, then we can reverse decisions later. Like, yeah, it's a whole situation where logic in wrestling, you just kind of shake your head and move on and realize that wrestling doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you start breaking down every aspect of it. So
yeah,
like the Irish whip.
Yeah, when you have a tag team that splits up because the one guy thinks the other guy hit him on purpose and while the back was turned, and then it's like, go back and rewatch the match, and you can
or do you not talk during the week before? Do you only show up to see each other at the shows?
Yeah. So again, we're applying the logic to illogical situations. Chad, as we think about authority figures, though, and wrap things up, one I wanted to throw out, and I don't know if you were joking or not at the time, but Pro Wrestling Tees right now has a Abraham Lincoln micro brawler. He's wearing the Andre the Giant type style attire with the strap, and of course that infamous hat. Of course, people have talked before that Lincoln did wrestle back in the day. Are you getting this figure? And what because we have seen other presidents. Donald Trump, of course, before he was president, was involved with WWE for quite a few different storylines and events, hosting WrestleManias 4 and 5, and then later with the whole Rosie O'Donnell feud that you and I bore witness to, and then the Battle of the Billionaires. So it's not necessarily out of line for a presidential person, a real life president, to be involved in the world of pro wrestling.
I was gonna say, didn't Lincoln beat Lou Thesz in a match? That I heard that one time. No, as of right now, I have not pre-ordered the Abraham Lincoln micro brawler. I have thought about it, but to me, unless it's a wrestler that I really like, I find the price of the micro brawlers a little extravagant. That's why I will just keep getting the free ones in my wrestling crate boxes every other month. That's a much better price, even though I can't pick which micro brawler I want, which is why I have a Skinner one sitting on my shelf right now, but um, I like I mean, not to get political, but I will always say one of the best things about Donald Trump being president was the fact that we had a WWE Hall of Famer as president, because that just, I don't know, that amuses me. Um, I know, like, what was it, 2008, 2012, 2008, because it would have been, they had Obama and Hillary do, and McCain, I believe, do little vignettes for like the SmackDown Your Vote, aspect. I mean, obviously, I think wrestling is big enough that politicians should play into, not play into it, but should treat them as, viewers to attract. It's a way to attract, potential voters. But do I see? I mean, again, don't want to go too political, but given the way things look like they're going to happen in November, I would much rather see a Hell in a Cell match between Trump and Biden, and that winner of that gets to be president, than have the people vote on it again. So let's just change it up. And, if we're going to have a sequel, you got to go bigger and better, or badder. So, yeah, I would maybe a Hell in a Cell Inferno Last Man Standing Buried Alive match, and with both people losing.
And then this guy, the gobbledygooker, comes in and becomes our next president.
Probably can't do any worse.
Well,
Sadly.
that being said, I do want to mention, and I don't want to end the show on a downer note, but I do want to mention, we were talking about wrestling figures earlier, and I debated bringing it up on the show because, but it is out on social media. Friend of the show, and Chad, I hadn't even mentioned this to you yet, but friend of the show and Stride Pro Wrestling referee, and he is now refereeing for some of the other companies here in Southern Illinois, Kevin McCleary. If you live in Southern Illinois, you saw the news on, I believe it was Thursday night, a massive fire, 3 homes destroyed, 2 others were damaged in the small town of Ziegler here. Kevin's house was one of those that was destroyed. He was a huge wrestling fan. His son, a huge wrestling fan. Lots of figures, and obviously, lots of things destroyed in that fire. There is a GoFundMe that I will have the link to in the show notes for this week's episode. So if you would like to make a monetary donation, feel so inclined to do so. The little boy wears a size medium in t-shirts. I'm going to go through some of the stuff I have here. If you have some figures, or if you're feeling generous out there and want to make a donation, you can reach out to me here at the podcast, or you can reach out again through that GoFundMe page and help a family, and obviously getting his wrestling toys back is probably low on the totem pole, but I do think that when you go through something like this and rebuilding and restarting, it's those little things, like your collection and things that can kind of bring you a little bit of normalcy. So,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead and finish.
I was just going to say, if people want to help, again, just reach out to me through the podcast, through the social media channels that we promote on, and of course, like I said, the link to that GoFundMe will be posted as well.
Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of levity to the situation so we don't end on such a downer. But you said he was a Stride referee.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't it about, I don't know, 8-10 years ago when another referee and booker for Stride had their house burned down? Is this maybe a Stride wrestler who is trying to get some, wasn't necessarily on a winning streak, maybe? Or have you gone through the roster of Stride wrestlers who might have some revenge motives?
No, I don't. I forgot about Adam and Aaron's fire too. That was, gosh, yeah, that was 10 years ago, 11 years ago. It was in 2003 or 13. Time is so, oh God, time is crazy.
But yeah, anyway, I thought you meant, when you mentioned figures, I thought you were going to talk about the A24 film company releasing the Zac Efron, Kevin Von Erich figure that you can get by on their website.
Yeah, that I wonder if they're going to do all of them. Have you heard
I
anything?
mean, I haven't heard. They only have Kevin available, and I think it's like $40 for the
Oh, is it really?
figures.
I
Yeah,
didn't.
so I don't see them doing any more than that. But and Iron Claw is now available on video on demand for anybody who has not seen it and wants to watch it from the comfort of your home.
Yeah, is it through Max or how are people able to watch it?
Right now, it's just rental,
Oh, okay.
but yeah, I believe A24 does have a deal with Max, so it will probably be there within a month or two.
Okay. And you can go back and listen to our review of that. It was the New Year's Day episode of the
Mhm.
podcast, I believe. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but go back and check the archives for that. Chad, anything else going on that you want to plug or promote before we wrap up this week's episode?
This weekend we have Elimination Chamber coming up, and I'm trying to decide if I'll watch it late or if I'll get up at 2 a.m. to watch it because being in Australia, the time difference that it will air, I'm sure you'll be up at 4 a.m. because your bladder will have awoken you at that point. So you'll probably stay up and watch. But um, no, we're again continuing on the road to WrestleMania. Um, I still don't know what the plans are, and I don't know if WWE knows what the plans are fully yet for the main events. But I think, and as I said last time, maybe that's a good thing. And I'm not looking for logic again, as we talked about earlier. Logic in wrestling is illogical, and they will just make things up as they go along. But sometimes not knowing where you're going. It's how I ended up in Saskatchewan.
Very true. So, any bold predictions for Elimination Chamber? Who do you think Seth's opponent for Mania is going to end up being?
I, I don't, there's the rumors that they're going to do the tag team match with Roman and Rock versus Seth and Cody on night one. If they do that, will Seth then defend on night two, or is his knee that messed up that keeping him in a tag match will be better off for him, and then see how things go. Again, I mean, the way the storyline is going, Drew McIntyre is the logical choice.
Mhm.
Um, Personally, I think I would like to see Gunther versus Seth, titles on the line, IC versus you know uh, world title. We haven't seen that in 37 years, 40,
34
34
years.
years. So yeah, that's the way I would go.
Okay. Well, we will wait and see. We will have another episode for you coming up next week, right here on the My 123 Cents podcast. Thanks again for listening, watching, and again, leave us a review and let us know your 123 cents about our 123 cents. Have a great week.